Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello there, this is Nina Hirschberger, and on the phone this evening, I am so privileged, so honored, and so thrilled to introduce you all to Dr. Barry Lycka. He is a cosmetic surgeon, a dermatologist, I think board-certified dermatologist out of Edmonton, Canada. I've had the privilege of knowing about Dr. Lycka for years, and about 6 months ago or so, or maybe even a year ago, I got to meet him in person, and we've been fast friends ever since. So you guys are all in for a real treat. I call him the $75 million man, and I'm going to let him tell his story. He'll obviously tell it better than I will. So welcome, Dr. Lycka. Thank you for taking the time. I know you just finished a very busy day, doing probably liposuctions and all sorts of things, but thank you for taking the time to share.
You know, it's always my pleasure. I think it's very important to educate our colleagues about how to build their practices. And it's a very difficult thing to do. I mean, building a practice for me has been a lifelong ambition. I work at it all the time, but it's something you have to do every day. It's not something you can take a day off from. And you really have to think about it. You have to spend time working on it, not only in your practice, but on your practice. Those are the things that I think most doctors don't realize, that working on your practice is just as important, even more important than working in your practice any day.
Well, you know, I think that's a really, really good way to start this whole thing because, you know, I don't know very many doctors. Well, I don't know any doctors, let me put it that way, who do everything you do. It's astonishing. Let's go back in time, though. Give a brief background of what you do and where you started and at least how you got to a certain point.
Sure. Let me do that for you, and I'll take you a walk down memory lane, so to speak. I graduated from dermatology at the University of Minnesota in 1989. I'm a Canadian, so I came back home to my home in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and I was very well trained as a dermatologist. I joined two other dermatologists, Dr. Kulak and Dr. Jampolsky, that were wonderful dermatologists, and they helped me get me into my practice to begin with. But just as I was graduating, the need to diversify became even more present. Canada was broke. We didn't have, back in the 1970s, Canada spent $1.20 for every dollar it was taking in. So literally it was bankrupt. And the International Monetary Fund told Canada that if you don't straighten out your act, we really have to pull your bonds from the world market because they're really junk bonds. So Canada took it to heart, and they started pruning. And healthcare was a social system that covered people from birth to grave. And literally, they took the axe to it. And doctors, being fat cats or cats, got the biggest brunt of it. They were told they could only make so much a year. Even if their practice cost more than that to run, they said, sorry, that's all we're going to spend. They also did things like they made certain provinces in Canada, when doctors said, you're going to do this, and they said, no, we're not, we're going to quit. They made it literally illegal to quit, or doctors could go to jail. But the need to change was evident. I mean, either you took 6 months off a year, or you needed to change and diversify. And I was very well trained in surgical skills. I was trained as a Mohs micrographic surgeon at the University of Minnesota, so I could cut off cancers, I could repair their defects. We had some rudimentary training in lasers because lasers were just starting back then. And we also learned a little bit about doing things like fillers back in the 1980s as well. And just as I was starting to get involved in cosmetic surgery, Botox was discovered, and it was one of the first tools that we had that could really change a person's looks without any downtime. It could really make a person look better and feel better without the hassles associated with major surgery. And so the concepts of cosmetic surgery started changing then too, where people didn't have to hide away for weeks and weeks on end, and they could get cosmetic surgery done and within a very short period of time, even within the same day, be back at work and functioning. 1986 to about 1989, new techniques of liposuction were being developed. Dr. Jeffrey Klein invented a technique called tumescent liposuction, meaning liposuction done totally under local. Before then, we had to do liposuction under general anesthesia, which was very, very, very dangerous, because what would happen as you put a person to sleep for a procedure, they'd bleed a lot, and that bleeding would cause clots to form that would form locally, and they could also spread to any part of the body. So in the old days of liposuction, we used to take off a lot of blood and a little bit of fat. With tumescent anesthesia, invented by Dr. Jeffrey Klein, who we refer to as St. Jeffrey most of the time, it really became a wonderful thing, because we could do liposuction even as an office-based procedure, and we could do it in such a way that it was safe and effective without much downtime. I went to Loveland, Colorado to learn from one of the colleagues of Jeffrey Klein, Willis, and we used to spend weekend courses where 30 doctors or 40 doctors would get together, and we'd do 30 or 40 cases in 2 days between the group of us. And it was wonderful learning. We learned, I call it barnstorming back then, and we learned some wonderful techniques, and we made some great friendships as well. But still, that didn't help us to practice cosmetic surgery. I mean, the techniques were one thing that we're developing, but selling it, getting people to come on board, really was a whole different game. And the flight to the top is a very, very difficult thing. It's like an education where you get the test before you get the lesson. And it really, really is a tough way to do it. There's no training in how to run a cosmetic practice in residency. In fact, they frown on it. The people in those programs think it is beyond them to teach people how to run a practice. Even dentists learn how to run a practice better than doctors do, which I find really, really alarming in this day and age. Somehow they think people are just going to learn it by osmosis, that they're going to learn how to be a great doctor without having to learn the skills. And so at that time, I sought out the world's experts, and I had been to a local Home Hardware or something like that, and I saw a book by a guy by the name of Dan Kennedy. And Dan Kennedy was known as the millionaire maker back then, and he wrote some great books. So I wrote one book, and at the end of it was a little coupon that said, if you have any problems, write me. Well, I wrote him, he wrote me back, and we started a friendship, and eventually I became a member of Dan Kennedy's mastermind clubs. Dan Kennedy taught me a lot about marketing. He taught me a lot about how to educate myself about the field and how to do things properly. And to this day, I thank Dan. And soon after, Dan Kennedy had a colleague by the name of Bill Glazer that came on board. Bill Glazer ended up buying Dan Kennedy's group and doing a lot with it. And so I learned a lot about marketing. I learned a lot about motivation. I learned a lot. The big thing I always like to do, though, was read. And I still read at least a book a week. I read 52 books a year, most of them on business so that I can learn new skills. The most important thing people have to learn about business is they have to realize that things that occur in other people's business, other lines of business, are just as important as what happens in your own, even more so than in your own community. Because if you do the same things in your community, all you can do is get as good as them at the very best. You'll never transcend that. You'll never get to a higher level. So what I did was I learned from Dan Kennedy, Bill Glazer. After they started fading out, I became a member of Brendan Burchard's Empire Group, a young man that taught me even more. I associated with great marketers, and in one of my groups, one of the greatest marketers of all time, Michael McLean, who runs an insurance agency, was in it. And I still go to Michael's mastermind clubs. I was just at that with Nina recently in Florida. Great group, again, just to motivate you and take you to the next level.
Okay, let's make sure I understand and make sure the people listening. So back in the 80s when you graduated and all this was happening in Canada, you realized that if you simply opened just the normal dermatology practice, you were going to be in trouble. You weren't going to make it.
And I realized that there was no way you could ever get to that high level, that you could never get to the upper echelons of this. And I realized that if I kept on going like I was and just staying in regular medicine, I'd literally starve. I realized that there was no money in the business and that I had made a big mistake by going into medicine rather than in business at that time. So I realized I could marry the two. I could marry business with being a great cosmetic doctor. I realized that what I could do was really learn how to market my practice, really how to take it to the next level. And since that time, I've become known as one of the biggest fat suckers in North America because I do so much liposuction. I've done over 10,000 cases since I've started, and I still love doing that almost every day, which is a huge, huge benefit to me. Scar correction is another thing we do, and lasers and Botox and fillers are big things we do every day.
And I think the American doctors are faced with that same thing that you faced back in the 80s. I think they're at that same one right now.
You know, I think they've been at it for a number of years, Nina. I think they're just starting to realize it, though. It's like being hit over the head so many times. They're starting to say, oh, my God, what am I going to do as this Obamacare takes over? What am I going to do to make my living? How am I actually going to survive as they put other competitors in my face and make me fight for every fee that I have? That each fee is not going to be as good as it used to be. And that's the reality of the situation here and now in the 21st century, 2015 and beyond, as people grapple with this. It's really going to be tougher to make a living than it's ever done.
So what they got to realize, so what you realized back there in the 80s, having found Dan Kennedy's book and read it and started corresponding, and then ultimately Bill and Brendan and all those, what you realized, and I've got friends who say the same thing, that you had to become an extremely good marketer. It's given that you were a good doctor. I know you well enough that I think if I remember, you didn't even do liposuction for, was it 3 years? Do I remember that?
Yeah, I started doing liposuction in the early 1990s. And when I started learning these new skills that weren't taught in my residency, I didn't feel comfortable with them. I said, there's no way I'm ever going to do this sort of thing unless I'm an expert. So between 1990 and 1994, I never did this in my office. I went to every course I could around the globe, everywhere I could learn it. I went to every expert's office to get good at it. Now, that made me a great doctor, but it didn't make me a great marketer. And, you know, they taught me a lot of myths, a lot of the doctors, about what it took to succeed. And I sure would like to go into those a little bit, Nina, because I think people hear them all the time.
Yeah, no, definitely we want to get it. But the point is, you study your craft also. You're always fine-tuning that craft. You're never satisfied. So when you realize that you weren't going to make it as a dermatologist, if that's all you did, and you still do dermatology, I know you do. I don't know, we'll talk about what percentage of your practice it is today, but when you were going to go into the cosmetic world, you determined that, I don't know, did you decide you were going to be the best in the world? Because I know you are.
You know, Nina, I think anybody that really is driven, really has got this thing that goes inside of them where they are driven to the point they want to be the best. I mean, you see this in great athletes. You see this in great politicians. You see this in world leaders where they're not happy keeping the status quo going. You see this in great business people as well, that they're always striving to get to the best. It's one of those things I think that's innate. I think it's one of those things that can be made stronger by paying attention to it. It's like, you know, if you want to go to something and wanted to do something, you'll crawl over broken glass on bleeding knees to get there. You know, you will do whatever it takes to get to that highest level. I call it the hunger. I call it the passion. It's something that's deep down in your side that you really want to become over and overcome everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think about you being a doctor, and here you and I, just a few weeks ago we were down hanging out with the insurance agents. Now, what other doctor? There was no other doctor there. What other doctor would take time out of their busy schedule, and you did, to spend a couple days with insurance guys? I mean, what are you going to learn from them? And I think
what I said, Nina, that if I learn one thing from them, if I take one little tidbit from their practice, if I take one little tidbit from their business, it might help me with what I do. It might help me to get to another level that I could never get at otherwise. It might help to get me to transcend everything. Because as I said, if I just stick with the guys in my groups, in my medical things, I can only do as good as they do. I can never do better. I can never transcend that. I can never get to that greatest level. And I think that's the key with a person that's constantly, like myself, constantly looking for better. If I can take one little bit, it sure would make a lot of difference.
So that's real key. So let's just even recap at this moment, this burning desire you talk about, the desire to just excel, and then to spend time with people outside your industry to learn that one little extra thing, to see what they do, to take ideas from them. So let's get now into very specifics. So you talked a minute ago about wanting to talk about the myths and stuff. But let's talk. How did you? Okay, so we know that you got world class. You went all over and you were educated by the best of the best. You had this burning desire, this drive to exceed. You knew that the cosmetic world was going to be the focus of it. But you walk in the office and something has to happen. So let's go through. What did you do?
Well, I think after realizing there are some basic techniques that people can learn, there are some simple things that a business can use, almost every business can use, to take one thing from one level to the other. And, I guess what really pushed me to do that was the foolishness of the medical profession. They used to say you used to just be three things and you survive. You had to be affable, meaning friendly. You had to be available and able. Well, able is given. I mean, you have to have a certain amount of ability, otherwise you'll never be a doctor. But being available 24/7 was what they pushed on you. Being affable, just being a friendly guy, and people will come in your doors. But that didn't cut it for me. I mean, how are people going to know you're friendly? How are people going to know you're a great doctor if you don't get out there and market? How do you really get your name out there to be at the top of the best if you're just having the 3 A's? It really doesn't help. And if you just go to a particular residency, even Harvard or Yale, how the hell do people know that or care about that? They really don't know who you are and what you can do. They really don't know your ability. So there are some proven ways of getting up to the top, and I guess I put those in practice.
Okay, let's go through them then.
Well, let's look at what makes a person the greatest. And after I did this, I looked at the greatest cosmetic surgeons in the world, the greatest cosmetic doctors in the world, and looked at what made them the best. And what makes people the best on anything is they're really an authority. People know them. People know that they're the best. Now, how do you know that there's the best plumber or the best doctor or the best lawyer above anybody else? Well, first of all, an authority has a clear message that they share. It really resonates with the community. It's simple. It really isn't a hard message. And they resonate in that in a lot of things. And one of the biggest things an authority does that in is in the books he writes. An authority writes books. They don't just read books. They write them, and they write a lot of books. I think I'm just in the process of putting out my 18th book right now, which is huge. I mean, that is something that's monumental. Now, writing a book is not easy, Nina, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's said that, it is easy, but all you have to do is slash your wrists and bleed. That's about as easy it is to write a book. It's not an easy thing at all. And the time aspect of writing a book is always difficult. And that is something that a lot of people cannot do. Really, really a tough thing to do. All I can say is I've written 17 books, and each book gets easier and easier to write. And there are some proven skills to write books as well that makes it a lot simpler for people who really want to do it.
But
authorities are also... Yeah, go ahead.
But you knew to be at the top, you had to be that authority. So while it was difficult, you had to figure it out, and you had to do it. There was no excuses.
There's no excuse at all. If you really want to be the best, you have to be the dominant player. And the dominant player has to do certain things to get dominant. They write books. They're presidents and vice presidents of organizations. They appear on TV, especially the news. If they don't get on the news, they strive to get on the news. They appear in newspapers as the authority. I mean, that is really, really important for things, to get out there and really get the message out. Authorities...
Wait a minute.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about so I assume you've been on the news and in lots of newspapers. How do you do that?
It really is a skill. I think the biggest breakthrough in getting into the news came from my friend Paul Hartunian. Paul Hartunian is a PR expert that really has a knack to get into the news. Do you remember Paul Hartunian's story, Nina?
Absolutely. He sold the Brooklyn Bridge.
Right. Now, there's the story. I mean, here's a guy that sold the Brooklyn Bridge, and he really did it with big aplomb and big fanfare, and was able to take that into a whole career. But he didn't stop there. He learned his skills and showed that you could apply these to every area. So I took those things and applied it to my own area. I took his ability to really resonate that message, and I took it and I applied it to my own area. And with that, I've been on the national news probably a dozen times. I've been in local newspapers hundreds of times. I've been on every television and every radio show, to the point that I refuse a lot of shows now because I just don't have the time to be on them. But that's what you do to get on the news.
For somebody who missed that, Paul Hartunian is an expert on press releases and getting press coverage. Free. I mean, you send press releases out. There are many sites now that you can do that, and there is a fee to sending them out. But they pick them up, and they pick you up, and that's how you got onto all of those. Again, you're looking for that hook. You're probably connecting it to something that's going on nationally or in the news or what people are talking about, and you've got a particular hook or a particular angle that you come out. Do you still send press releases and stuff out, Dr. Lycka?
I used to send a lot of them out, but I find at my level of the game, it's just as easy to phone the editor and tell them I have a great story, and the editor usually puts me in now. So press releases were something I did a lot of. Now it's just as easier to phone the person writing the articles, ask them, to say, look, I've got a great story on this. If you have any interest, let's talk. If not, that's fine too. Because I know that if I phone 20 people, I will get 3 or 4 people calling me back.
Yeah, because you've established a relationship with them. They trust you. They know you. They know you're a good person to interview. How do you come up with your stories, though? I mean, if a doctor's listening to this, or even anybody, could be a car repair guy that's listening to this, how do you come up with your stories?
The stories are always present themselves, and they're usually great stories. I'll tell you a little story that I wanted to get out really badly, and that's about a technique I do called scar correction. In the year 2015, we can make almost every scar improve to the point that it's not a problem. We can take scars, even bad burn scars, and make them vanish. And I wanted to get the story out a great deal. So I spent 2 years working on a plan to get it out. What we did was we partnered with a organization called About Face. About Face is a worldwide organization that helps people with facial deformities. So they were the charity we were going to raise things for. And then we got a film, a world-class film that did an Edmonton premiere called Trial by Fire, which is a great film that everybody should watch, that really shows how people survive a cataclysmic event like a fire. So what I did was put on a grand act. I put on this great big performance with the director of the film coming up, the several people that had terrible scars, one being Tanya St. Arnaud, who was covered on the Anderson Cooper show, in fact. And she was a young lady from Quebec who had acid thrown in her face. And she was terribly scarred by this. Anderson Cooper heard about this, got her on the show, and then sent her to one of my colleagues, Dr. Jill Wabel in Florida, to be treated. Well, I wanted her to be here to explain how these techniques could be worked. And then I got about a dozen of my patients together that had their scars corrected by me. So we had a monster night. We had a night where we had all these celebrities coming. So we started getting to the press a week before, calling them, telling them about this. And, we were covered by every newspaper, every TV station, every radio station in the whole Edmonton area. Edmonton's an area of over 1 million people. And to get this kind of publicity would have cost me hundreds of millions of dollars. But the very fact that I put it together and put it together in such a way that it was a great story from many, many points of view, that they could take those stories and run with them, it was just absolutely marvelous. And the people that were my guests were the people that were on the TV show and on the radio shows. And it was just the most scintillating event that I've ever been able to put together in my career.
And obviously that gave you the halo effect. I mean, because I know you have this passion, but it also gives you a halo effect. It gives you the authority. You're the the person that does all of this. So there's an authority person does that kind of thing, don't they?
Well, that's right, and an authority does this, but an authority has certain things like positioning. I like to think I'm different, in addition to being the best. I'd like people to think that there's no one that can do what I could do. But I also want people to know that I listen to them and try to do things because I listen. But I don't give any BS. I really don't have time for BS. I won't give any BS. I shoot from the hip, and that's the way it is. And so I really position myself in a certain way so that people will get that message as well. So in everything I do, those things really come out.
So that's kind of the second tip, positioning.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the tips I gave a little while ago was clarity of message, that you need a clear message to tell people that you want people to know exactly what your byline is. So when they say, hear your name, like my name, Dr. Barry Lycka, they should have about a little byline below you that they could say after you do that. So after you hear Barry Lycka, I like people to think natural good looks are his business. Or Dr. Lycka can help you live beautifully. Or it's an organization where quality matters and expertise counts. Those are some simple, clear messages that resonate with the marketplace. And those are the things I want them to think when they come to my office over and above everything else. Those are simple, charismatic messages that just drive through everything else. They just should resonate with everybody.
Interesting. Okay. Can we go back into the positioning then too? How do you position yourself? You've got competition obviously with 1 million people up there in Edmonton. How do you position yourself though?
I guess it comes to the fact that because I'm so well known, most people will choose between me, and me. And the question always asked is, how do I get my message out to the market? And I'd love to tell you a little story about a Hawaiian fisherman that really will help everybody to understand about why I do what I do. Would you mind if I share that, Nina?
I would love that.
Okay, the Hawaiian fisherman is something, I love to go to Hawaii, and when I go to Hawaii, I love to walk on the beach. I get up early before my wife and the kids are awake, and I just go walking on the beach. And one day, I was walking on the beach, and I saw this guy drive up in this most amazing truck. I mean, it must have cost $200,000. It had chrome everywhere, running lights, music blaring, everything that you can imagine in a truck. It was a huge truck and just one of those phenomenal things, a vision coming out of nowhere. And this guy who looks pretty rubby-dubby came out, and he had about a dozen fishing lines in the back. And what he did was bait each hook, throw each hook in the water, harness his lines, and then he was getting in his truck to leave. He was leaving his fishing lines there and leaving for the day. And I said, geez, there's got to be a story here. This guy's going to educate me about what he's doing because I don't understand it one iota. So I knock on his truck, and he smiles at me. I said, hey, you got an amazing truck here. And he said, yeah, I got a great truck. I love it. And I said, but, you're just leaving all these fishing lines here for people to take them and things like that. He said, no. People don't take things in Hawaii. He said, those fishing lines are out there, and they're catching fish for me. I mean, I love fish. I just hate fishing, he said. And he said, what I do is by putting all these fishing lines out everywhere that a fish can catch them, that at the end of the day, I come back and I harvest my fish. I have fish everywhere. I have fish that I sell to all the restaurants in town, and they get all the fresh fish. And during the day, I can do whatever I want. But what I've got here is the greatest fish in town. And so I sell it to everybody, and that's giving me my style of living that I could have. I could do anything. And I said, oh, my God, boy, have I been missing the boat for all these times. Said, I need a lot of fishing lines catching people all the time so that people can trip over my fishing lines, get the message, and come to see me. That's what I need. And so I learned that there were a lot of different ways to get those messages out there. There's radio, there's television, there's newspapers. The best things are things said about you rather than you having to market yourself. So if you get an article in a newspaper, you can amplify it by putting it on the internet. You can amplify it by doing PR releases about it. You can amplify it by using it on your website and keep bringing it back. All this thing is very important. If you get a radio show, it's very important to amplify the things that you're doing, and that can get your message out more. If you get a TV show, it can amplify these messages too. So all these things are fishing lines catching you fish every day.
Yeah, in fact, let's talk about that radio show. You have one that you do on a weekly basis or monthly basis, something that.
Nina, I love talking to other doctors, and I love finding out what's happening in cosmetic surgery. So every week I do my own radio show on the internet called Inside Cosmetic Surgery Today. It's on a station called webtalkradio.net. My friend Brad Saul talked me into doing it several years ago. So what we do every week on our half-hour show, we have a guest, and we talk about the newest, best cosmetic procedures on the planet. I say my 2 cents, and the other person says their 2 cents. And we really discuss in depth all the cosmetic procedures that we care to discuss. So every week we have some new great things coming out, and it really is an exciting time to share this information with everybody. It really is an exciting time to get that message out, and I love doing that show. It's really fun. But what amazes me is how it's grown. I have over 7,000 downloads from the internet every week of that show, and it keeps growing by 300 to 500 people every week. And
you've been doing it, what did you say, 3 years?
I think 3 years, we've got 150 to 200 shows, and it keeps on growing and growing and growing. In fact, by doing this, I've become the voice of dermatology, the voice of cosmetic surgery. Our show now is the #1 internet show on cosmetic surgery in the world.
And what was interesting, you said to me, you interview other cosmetic surgeons. So in other words, you're interviewing what somebody might say is your competition.
Yeah, some people could say they're competition. You know, I don't really view anybody as competition. I really view them as people that are people that are in my field. I feel them as colleagues, as people that are collaborators. You know, if people want to go to somebody else, fine, let them. But, you know, when people weigh things, they weigh the skill, the ability of a doctor. They really take a lot of things into account. They take into account, you know, the abilities he has, his ability to communicate, his ability to write, his ability to tell them about their problem. And all these things really change the ball game for things. You know, in the year 2015, Nina, we're in the communication age. We're in the age where we have to be able to communicate. Otherwise, we will not survive at all.
And so these 7,000 downloads are all over the world. Do you have people that come from all over the world to come and, you know, have liposuction or Botox or something with you?
You know, all the time. We get all sorts of things coming from all over around the world, and I really like that a lot. That's the difference between my practice and a lot of other practices, is that people seek me out, people look for what I have to offer, and that is huge, you know. So I don't have to often go out and force myself to fish. The fish come to me. It really is one of the best ways to do that. It's like going fishing and using dynamite to blow up the fish, and they all come into your fishing basket. It really makes a huge difference when people seek you out rather than you having to seek them out.
So you got a clarity of message. You've positioned yourself as the authority. You've positioned yourself as the expert, and you put all sorts of fishing lines into the water, so that you're not having to go out there fishing. They're coming to you. They're just biting on your pole. Is that a lot different than what other doctors do?
You know, most doctors think, you know, I've got an empty waiting room. How am I going to fill it in today? Most doctors think, how am I going to make my time matter? Most of our doctors fret and worry when they have a little extra time on their hands, and they don't have a plan for using it, so they feel they have to be 200% busy to fill in the spot. You know, if I'm ever quiet, what I use that for is more marketing, more ability to write more, to speak more, to get my message out more, which is huge. You know, I look for opportunities to get my message in front of the crowd without having to really work at it. For example, just this week, I'm doing a huge event for the YWCA in Edmonton. The YWCA is a group of people that really has a message to help women in society. So every year I sponsor a big event called Woman of Distinction, where they choose some of the best women in our society in various categories and are honored. Well, I'm the main sponsor for the event every year. So when this event goes on, which will go on the 28th of this month, we will have over 800 women in that room, all women that could easily be my customer. Now, am I marketing to them? No, but they're looking at me in a totally different light than a person that's selling products to them. I'm the person that's sponsoring a world-class event to honor women, which is really a huge benefit in our society. So people look at me totally different than a salesman.
So do you announce the women? Are you the MC for the day? Is your name just
well?
in the
I guess I'm the grand poobah because my name is on everything. It really is on all the marketing material. It's on everything. It's a Woman of Distinction by the YWCA, sponsored by Dr. Barry Lycka. So when they have everything on the stage, my logo, my name is right behind it. So think of this as a big game show. Think of it as one of the biggest events in your city with your name behind everything about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of doctors would say, but Dr. Lycka, that costs X number of dollars.
I think everything you should look at a return on investment. And yes, this does cost X number of dollars, but how much does advertising on TV cost? And what is your return on investment from something like that versus a big gala event like this that's promoted for 6 months out of the year with your name associated with every aspect of it?
So then it comes down to, are they going to choose you or you or you? Because you're the one that knows everything about.
The answer is they know that I'm the guy. Are they going to choose me or somebody else in the neighborhood? And, if people want to choose somebody else, fine, they have a free right. But at least I've given it a chance that they can choose me more than anything else. And, this year I even diversified more because my daughter, who's a nurse practitioner, has joined me in the practice doing some of these cosmetic procedures. So some women would sooner have a woman work on them than a man. So I have my own daughter doing those things for me now. So that certainly helps to choose between me or my daughter.
Now, I'm sure that you're probably the cheapest in your community, right? So you're the cheapest doctor. There's a no-brainer.
Nina, I just hate cheapness. I despair cheapness. To me, being cheap is like working with Walmart or these other great unwashed people. Have you ever been in Walmart at 2 o'clock in the morning? Oh,
no.
My God, it's the most unsavory experience on the planet. There's people that come in there that are just like the Beverly Hillbillies, and it really is just, oh my God, which part of the planet did these people crawl off of? To me, that's what being cheap is like. I mean, I think being cheap is the wrong way to go. You have to be the most expensive in your category. If you're not the most expensive, you're cutting corners. You have to do things in a very cheap way for people. You really have to there was an old line that you can have 3 things: quality, service, or expertise. And you have to only choose 2 of those 3. To me, I want all 3 of the 3, and the only way you're going to get it is to buy it with high dollars.
So if somebody comes into your practice and says, and you tell them how much this liposuction is going to cost, and they say, well, Dr. Lycka, I could go to XYZ, guy, and it's a lot less expensive. Why are you so expensive? What do you say?
All I do is look in the eye and says, yes, you could, but have you ever bought a cheap pair of blue jeans and they fell apart in no time whatsoever? Or I tell them, if I sold you a Mercedes-Benz for $1, what would your reaction be?
What's wrong with it?
The reaction, what's wrong with it? And I said, that's what you get when you buy something cheap. I mean, you walked into my waiting room, you saw how busy I was. You saw how this is here. There's a reason I'm busy. You could go to a doctor that isn't busy, but then you have to wonder why. And people who come to me know I'm busy, know I do quality work. They know from people talking about me, from my testimonials, from things in my practice, that really they're getting the best value for their dollar on the planet. I'm not cheap, but that's what I want people to know when they get to know me is I just want 2 words to go through their mind is I want them to say, God, is he good? And number 2 is, God, is he going to be expensive?
Yeah. Okay, so what other advice? What other, you got a clear message. You became the authority. You have an expert status. You've got a lot of fishing poles in the the pond. You've priced yourself at the top, not the bottom, not the middle. You're the top because you're the expert and the authority. Anything else particularly?
I think another thing that people do have to realize is authorities, experts are associated with other experts. So one of the things everybody can do and should do is make sure they get their pictures taken with VIPs and everywhere that they go. They really need to be seen as a person that has VIPs around them and really need to see that other people are around them that are VIPs. So that is something that could go everywhere. I mean, if you get one of my favorite pictures that I've ever had is a wonderful picture of Paula Abdul with me. And Paula Abdul is on my shoulder with her hand on my chest. People always ask me, how did I get that picture? And I said, well, I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. It's a great little picture, but it's got to be more business than anything else. And how did I do that? Well, I was at a seminar, Joe Polish seminar, and Paula was there. And I asked her, do you mind if I get a picture taken with you? And she looked at me and said, I know about you. You've been in Dan Kennedy's books. I'd love to have a picture with you. And I said, okay. How are we going to do this? And she said, are you married? And I said, yes. And she said, then I'm going to make your wife jealous. And she has this beautiful cheesecake picture with me as a result of it. And it's a wonderful picture that's got to be more business than anything else. But you can get
because you probably used it in your marketing. You can get pictures
with everybody. You can get pictures with mayor. You can get pictures with everybody. Everybody has 10 VIPs in their practice.
Back in your early days, have you done any procedures on a VIP person just for their testimonial or anything?
I always think they have to pay something, otherwise it has no value. I might lower the price for that one person if that way. But if a person really wants to give a testimonial, they'll give it. And we ask for testimonials from everybody. It's expected of people. It's expected of them to tell them what we did, because we want them to educate others about what we do as well.
Do you have a certain talk track that, to ask for that testimony? Do you ask for it immediately afterwards?
We can get it in writing, and we ask for it on the day that they're maximally happy. If they're happy with stuff that they've got done, we ask for it right then and right there. And if they need some help writing it, because a lot of them are just gushing about what they just had done, and so we get our staff to help them write it down in such a way that it's just wonderful.
Interesting. Okay. So I'm going to recap.
Another thing authorities do is win awards. And I'm sure almost every doctor's won some awards, but they keep it in their closet or they keep it hidden away. One award I'm very proud of is in my area is called the Consumer's Choice Award, because it's the consumers in our community that choose who the best in that area is. So one thing I've won for the last 14 years in a row is the Consumer Choice Award for cosmetic surgery in Edmonton. Now, that's really not that amazing, except no one's ever done it before. So it really is something that I'm proud of. It's really something I love to get, and it's really something I try to get all the time because it's a great award. It's voted on by people in our community without any regard to anything else. So it's a great little thing that really I put in all my materials. Consumer's Choice Award winner for 14 consecutive years. Now, can you picture winning a sports event for 14 years in a row, Nina? Can you picture winning a Stanley Cup or a Super Bowl or a basketball event for 14 years in a row? I don't think that's ever been done before. Yet I've won the Consumer's Choice Award for cosmetic surgery in Edmonton for 14 consecutive years. No break whatsoever.
And there's probably got to be some intention there. Do you ask your patients to vote? Is there anything you do for that?
I think right now it's self-perpetuating. In the early phases, yeah. But right now it's self-perpetuating because everybody loves to talk about these things as well. Everybody loves to do that. But, every time we speak at a national or international conference, that goes out to my group of people that are in my database. Every time we speak on a world phase, we talk about it. Every time I do something like sponsor the Woman of Distinction, it goes out to my herd through emails, through my newsletters, through Twitter, through Facebook, through LinkedIn. Every time we do this, we get messages out about what we're doing. And right now, this week, for example, we're running a food drive for the food bank to help feed those that are underfed at this time of year, because it's a bad time of year. So another thing, we get people involved as well. Great time of year to do it in May or at the end of April, because the food banks are empty. Christmas is gone. The big events of fall are far away. And, in most communities, there is a huge need for food. You and I were just in Orlando together, and 1 out of 10 families really needs food from a food bank source there in a wealthy city like Orlando. Every city has these needs. You just have to associate with those causes.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I mean, there's many things that I gathered right during that thing. One is associating, and I know you've done this a lot, nonprofits, giving back and stuff in your community. So you've associated and you're doing that a lot. Another thing is the marketing. You're talking about emails, you talked about newsletter, you talked about Twitter. I don't know if you've got a Facebook, social media, whatever. But one thing I know you do is you do a printed newsletter, don't you, that goes out to all of your patients. I forgot how many.
Yeah, every month, Nina, we produce a newsletter that goes out to 7,000 people. 7,000 people. Now, I used to worry about the cost of that years ago. I used to be very concerned about that. But Dan Kennedy said, how many people do you get of liposuction from your newsletter, a month? And I said, well, probably 1 or 2. He said, how much does your newsletter cost? And I told him the dollar. He said, you fool, you should send more newsletters because you get a lot of business from it. And yeah. I said, yeah, you're right. This is my number one thing. The reason why is simple. I mean, who buys from somebody is those that already love them and care for them. It's really, really a simple thing to sell to people who really care about you and really already know you.
Well, and you're always top of mind, too. If they get a newsletter every single month, 7,000 people, they can't forget about Dr. Lycka.
Well, I just got a person in today who I had not seen since the early 1990s. He's been getting my newsletter ever since. Well, back then I was treating a big wart on his foot. Now he wants some cosmetic surgery done. So I talked to him, and sure enough, we're going to be doing some pretty significant events for him. But, if I didn't keep on doing this over and over and over again, I wouldn't be successful. And for those that are first starting, I'd say start small and keep building and keep building. Make sure when you're sending out your newsletter that there are people that keep getting it, that want it. Make sure that there are people that keep doing it, and keep on building.
Well, so many people these days want to do it just an e-newsletter. They want to send out an email. It sounds like you do that also.
I send out a lot of things on the internet, but I really love things that are sent in paper, because that to me is stuff that gets passed around. That's stuff that sticks around. That's stuff that irritates people and really aggravates them. It becomes top of consciousness marketing right in their face. I mean, how many emails never get open, Nina? Number really astounds me. I mean,
and yet every single one of us go out to our mailbox wondering what today.
Yeah, and especially as the mail is getting cut back on. I mean, both your postal service and our postal service is going bankrupt. So there really is less and less newsletter and less mail being sent. what a beautiful channel to get people's attention is something in their mailbox. You know, it really hits home as something that's very important, something that's sexy, something that's seductive, and gets people to the point that they really, really like that.
Well, and there's no competition because I'm sure your competition isn't sending anything.
You know, I think laziness is the worst thing that can happen in any practice. And most doctors, all they want to do is cut, sew, laser, suck. They don't want to do anything else. But, you know, if they're not working on their practices, they're really doing themselves a big disservice. They should be working on their practice every day. They really should be working on that stuff in such a way that it really makes a large difference.
Another thing that I heard you say a few minutes ago is when you speak all over the world. You do that a lot, too. You're a keynote, a primary speaker at many events.
You know, it's really a wonderful life that I live, and I do travel a lot. You know, I will be just next month going to Vancouver, Canada. There's a World Congress of Dermatology coming up where thousands of doctors will be there. I'm presenting 6 post-1 and 1 oral presentations. So this is a congress that only occurs every 4 years. And yet, at the age of 59, I'm still being honored with people wanting to know the newest, the best, and stuff like that I'm putting on. In the fall, I'm actually going all the way to Vietnam to give a lecture. And wonderful to do that. I love to travel, and on that trip, my dear wife will be coming with me. So we'll spend a month touring Southeast Asia, which is something that I've wanted to do for a long time. So, you know, life is good, but again, speaking takes time. These things take time. You got to make sure you have a clear message, again, you can share, and you got to be able to be at the top of your game all the time, which I really think is important.
But you're speaking to your colleagues, but what you do is you talk about it in your newsletter. So the doctor that they're choosing is a world-renowned speaking person, and it's true.
Well, that's right. I mean, my patients need to know that I'm one of the best. They need to know that even my colleagues listen to me. They need to know that I'm the guy that educates other people. They need to know that I'm just not the average smuck.
Interesting. Well, we're just about out of time. Is there anything else that I've forgotten to ask you, some burning tip that you could leave with somebody?
You know, one of the greatest pearls on how to make this easier is really what you really need to do is get things together and work with some professionals that really can help you cut through some of this. And, you know, I've really found working with you as a shortcut to get some of this done as well, because writing is easier, getting packages out to people is easier. Making something that I call a shock and awe package is really useful, because that's something you can send to every one of your new clients that come in the door, and it's much simpler to put your best foot forward that way. And you certainly do have the knack for doing that, making something really glossy and really well for people.
Well, I appreciate that, and I love working with brilliant people like you. The one thing that made me think about is that I had to chuckle because you're talking about even speaking worldwide, but I'm going back to the radio program, because I know you've told me when I said, well, yeah, but Dr. Lycka, you're talking to your competition, and you told me one time, yeah, but I get to learn all the latest and newest things from all these people, which is so smart.
Well, you know, it's nice to know what the competition's doing. It's nice to know what they're really loving and what they're doing as well. So that gets me into the mode of either wanting to do it or staying ahead of the curve. So it really is something that I think is beneficial for my practice as well as other people's practice as well. So
which puts you at the top of the game when you're going to speak at those events. So I love it.
You know, I think life is a wonderful thing if you treat it properly, Nina. I think if you really do this in such a way, it really makes a difference. There's something I invented called the triangle of preeminence a long time ago, and it refers to three things. You need to have expertise service as one of the pinnacles of it. You must have extraordinary marketing, and you must have community service, all as a triad. You really need this triangle to really make your business go. And if you keep working that triangle, if you keep perfecting each part of that triangle and keep talking about parts of that triangle, you really will have a wonderful practice.
Awesome. Well, that's how you get to $75 million is doing all of that, not any one thing. So.
Well, I'm like a duck. I look like I'm staying still in the water, but underneath the water, my feet are paddling like crazy to keep myself in that one place. I'm a person that likes to be calm on the surface, but just agitating below the surface. I find it's very important to keep moving a lot of pieces going, a lot of balls in the air. Success is often made in a messy kitchen, and if you don't have a messy kitchen, you're unlikely to be successful.
Yeah, you're not a very good cook if you don't have that messy kitchen. Well, I appreciate it. I'm just amazed at the time that you've taken. And if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, is that something that they could do?
I don't mind. Sometimes I can give advice online. Sometimes it takes more of a detailed analysis of them. I'll just give my personal email here. I know people won't abuse it, and I always shut off my email if I don't want to be bothered by anybody. So the answer is it's simple for me to give it. My four initials are BASL, Bravo, Apple, Sierra, Lima. My daughter's initials are CJSM, Charlie, Jam, Sierra, Mary. So the email is baslcjsm@gmail.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, and you have a great rest of your evening.
Well, thank you so much. It really is, as I say, I've got a lot of things I want to do tonight. I've got these papers to finish off for the World Congress. I've got a couple of other things I got to do. I'm doing a bit of a keynote address for a reception for the Women of Distinction that'll be held tomorrow night. So I have to make sure all my T's are crossed and I's are dotted. So another fun night for me as well, because I get in touch with 51 wonderful women that are world leaders tomorrow night. And again, part of that big event that'll be going on the 28th of the month. So for me, this is a lot of fun. It's something I love to do, I strive to do, I stay at the front of everything, and people know me and welcome what I have to say as well.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.